Have you ever stopped to wonder where the scientific advice we're supposed to trust actually comes from? You know, when a doctor gives you guidance, what's really behind that information?
Well, I can tell you it's not just one person in a lab coat having a sudden stroke of genius. Real, trusted medical advice is the final product of this huge, incredibly structured scientific process. It's designed from the ground up to filter out all the noise, all the bias, and find the clearest possible signal of truth. We're talking about things called systematic reviews and meta-analyses, and you can think of them as the ultimate scientific investigation. Seriously, they gather all the existing research on one specific question, and they can take over a year to finish, involving a whole team of brilliant people, top doctors, specialized librarians, expert statisticians, the whole crew.
But with that many moving parts and in that many big brains, how does anything stay on track? Well, this is where the unsung hero of scientific evidence comes in, the project manager. They're the ones making sure this incredibly complex machine not only runs, but actually produces something we can all rely on.
The best way to think of them, they're the conductor of a scientific orchestra. It's their job to make sure every single expert is playing their part perfectly and in total harmony to create one powerful, cohesive masterpiece of evidence. So let's follow that journey. Let's see how a review goes from just a simple question to a huge published study, all through the eyes of the project manager. We'll start with building the blueprint. Then we'll go on the great evidence hunt. We'll watch the incredible filtering process, see how they pull out the truth, and finally, how they share the final story.
Okay, first things first. You got to build the perfect blueprint. You can't build a house on a shaky foundation, right? Same thing in science. Before anyone even thinks about reading a paper, the project manager acts as the architect, making sure the foundation of this entire study is absolutely rock solid.
The main tool for this is something called the PICO framework. It stands for Population, Intervention, Comparator, and Outcome. The project manager uses this to take a kind of vague idea like, hey, does this drug work? And turn it into a laser-focused, totally answerable question. It's literally the GPS that keeps the entire research team from getting lost.
And believe me, they need that GPS because of this monster right here, scope creep. It is the #1 threat to any project. You start with a simple question, and before you know it, it spirals out of control. The project manager has to be the gatekeeper, using that PICO framework to protect the project from getting so big it can never be finished. So to keep that chaos at bay, the PM creates a super useful tool called the RACI matrix. It clearly defines who is responsible, who is accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who just needs to be kept informed for every single task. This simple chart just gets rid of all the confusion and makes sure that when you have a dozen experts working together, absolutely nothing falls through the cracks. All right, the blueprint is solid. Now it's time for the next big phase, the evidence hunt. The team has to find every single relevant study ever published on their question, and the PM is the one coordinating this massive, massive task. And let me be clear, this is not a simple Google search, not even close. It's an incredibly rigorous 4-step process. The PM gets everyone together to brainstorm search terms. They oversee the librarian who builds these super complex search queries. They coordinate a peer review where another expert librarian stress tests that search to find any blind spots. And they make sure every single step is documented so someone could perfectly replicate it years from now. So, in a way, the PM becomes a translator. They have to bridge the gap between the clinical experts, who know the medicine inside and out, and the information specialists, who speak the unique language of these enormous scientific databases. Okay, now for what I think is the most dramatic part of the entire journey. After the hunt, the team is staring at a mountain of potential studies. The PM now has to manage what we call the great funnel of scientific screening, to whittle thousands of papers down to just a tiny handful. It almost always starts with a huge number. I mean, look at this. In this case, over 12,000 potential studies were found by the search, just an impossible number for any one person to even look at.
The first cut is always the biggest. The PM coordinates a team where at least 2 researchers independently read just the titles and abstracts of those 12,500 papers. And bam! After that first pass, we're already down to 850.
Next up, the team has to read the full articles for all 850 of those studies. This is super intensive, and the PM is there managing the whole process, including resolving disagreements when the screeners can't agree on whether a paper meets their strict criteria. And the funnel narrows again, way down to just 45 articles.
So, just to recap, from over 12,000 initial hits,
Only 10 studies actually make it through this whole process. 10. These are the diamonds. This is the core evidence that's going to form the basis for the entire review.
Now that we have our final 10 studies, you might think the hard part's over. Nope. The work now gets even more detailed. It's time to extract all the essential truths from each paper, and the PM's role shifts into extreme quality control mode.
The absolute gold standard for this is called double data extraction. It's exactly what it sounds like. Two different researchers pull every single piece of data from a study, all on their own. The PM then makes sure their results are compared, and if there's even a tiny disagreement, a third expert is brought in to be the tiebreaker. This is how you prevent even the smallest human error from slipping into the final result.
You see, the point here is that the project manager doesn't just hope for high-quality work. They engineer it. They build a system. They pilot test the forms, they enforce double extraction, they manage that whole conflict resolution process, and they do final data checks before locking the data set to be sent for analysis. It's all about checks and balances to guarantee accuracy.
Finally, after months, sometimes more than a year of intense work, it's time to share the final story. The PM's job now is to shepherd this massive project through the final, high-stakes phase of writing, review, and publication.
And these final weeks are an absolute sprint to the finish line. The PM is coordinating everything, getting that first draft written, conducting a full audit to make sure it complies with strict international reporting standards, and then chasing down and integrating feedback from maybe a dozen different authors, all on a really tight deadline.
And submitting a paper to a journal isn't just emailing a Word doc. Oh no. The PM is responsible for pulling together this whole complex package. The manuscript itself, the actual story, is less than half of it. There are compliance checklists, huge supplementary files with all the raw data, and all the boring but necessary administrative forms.
So the next time you read about a major medical finding or a new piece of scientific advice, just take a second to think about the incredible process behind it. Will you just see the final result? Or will you maybe see that invisible conductor, the project manager, who guided that entire orchestra to create that single, powerful, and trustworthy note of truth?